The Young and the Restless spoilers shock May 22, 2025 Thurdays full episodes. Victoria's request took Cole by surprise the moment she broached the subject over lunch in her sunlit office at Newman Enterprises. She had cleared her throat, her signature poise giving way for just the briefest second to a vulnerability she seldom allowed herself to display. "I want you to move in with me, Cole," she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying the weight of her hope. Cole set down his fork, absorbing the calm earnestness in her tone. He knew exactly what it meant. Victoria was offering not only her home but a fresh start, a chance for them to forge a deeper bond beyond boardroom strategy sessions and carefully guarded civilities. For a moment, he hesitated, memory of his own restless past flickering in his mind. But then he smiled, that easy, warm expression that first drew Victoria to him, and nodded. "I'd like that very much," he replied, and with those words, he felt the first tremor of a life reconfigured into something steadier, more meaningful. Meanwhile, in the hushed, opulent corridors of society, Kyle found himself sizing up his own advantage even before he had taken a seat. Audra swept into the bar with all the confidence of an actress making her grand entrance, her eyes gleaming as she spotted Kyle at the corner of the mahogany counter. He rose to greet her, and she responded with a playful smirk. Their history had been rocky, spiced with professional rivalries at Jabot and the upstart Vibrante, woven through with personal misunderstandings that had festered into resentment. Yet today, as she perched on the bar stool beside him, they greeted each other with the measured courtesy of two people who believe they have the upper hand. Across the room, Holden watched them with a mixture of curiosity and concern. He rose and crossed the room, extending an invitation. "Kyle," he said, slinging an arm around his friend's shoulders, "come join me." Kyle gestured toward the empty stool beside Holden, and Audra settled in with a confident flourish. "So," Holden began, raising his eyebrows in mock interrogation, "how do the two of you know each other, anyway?" Kyle exchanged a glance with Audra before answering. "We worked together in LA," he said coolly. Audra leaned in conspiratorially. "For a short time, and honestly, a total waste of my talents," she added, the faintest edge of bitterness coloring her words. Kyle offered a brief nod, as if conceding that her time had indeed been better spent elsewhere. Holden chuckled, taking a sip of his drink. "And what about the fights?" he prodded gently. "You two seem to have had a few memorable disagreements." Kyle shrugged, meeting Holden's gaze squarely. "Our time together wasn't exactly smooth sailing," he admitted, "but those days are behind us." He turned to Audra. "No reason to hold on to old grudges, right?" Audra gave him a sardonic smile. "Agreed. Besides, there's plenty of room for both Jabot and Vibrante to thrive." Her remark hinted at her confidence in Vibrante's trajectory under her leadership, and Kyle found himself nodding once more, acknowledging the unspoken truth that competition had only sharpened both of them. Audra with her strategic brilliance and Kyle with his polished instincts. As the animated banter continued, each participant probed the other with casual questions and teasing jabs, their words layered with subtext. The tension between corporate empires and old rivalries simmered just beneath the surface. Holden, ever the diplomat, raised his voice above the hum of conversation. "Well, I'd love to hear more about those battles," he said, leaning forward. "Maybe you two can enlighten me over another round." Kyle raised his glass in agreement, and Audra followed suit, their mock alliance sealed in a toast that resonated with both rivalry and reluctant respect. Back at Chancellor Estate, Claire found herself pacing in Victor's library, soft leather chairs and lines of law tomes framing the urgency in her steps. She had always prided herself on self-reliance, but this time she needed something only her grandfather could provide. Guidance, resources, and his trademark willingness to bend the rules for family. The moment he entered the room, she stopped and turned to face him. Victor's stern expression softened at the sight of her anxious relief. "Claire," he said, his voice low but firm. "What's troubling you?" She laid out the situation, Nike's legal entanglements threatening to derail her next art exhibit, the mounting pressure from patrons demanding swift resolution, and the emotional toll it had taken on her. Victor listened, steepling his fingers. When she finished, he stood and walked to his desk, pulling out a sleek envelope. "Consider this your lifeline," he said, sliding it across. "I've spoken with our contacts. You'll have everything you need to move forward, and the leverage to keep those creditors at bay." Claire exhaled, gratitude and determination mingling in her chest. With Victor's help, she knew she could turn the crisis into an opportunity that would cement her reputation as more than a chancellor by name but a chancellor in command. As dusk settled over Genoa City, the intertwined dramas converged at society's neon-lit entrance. Kyle and Audra emerged together, their laughter echoing against the stone facade, while Holden followed close behind, shaking his head at their antics. Across town, Cole unpacked a few framed photographs in Victoria's spacious penthouse, a hesitant first step toward sharing a life built on trust rather than transactions. And in the hushed grandeur of Newman Ranch, Claire sat beside Victor, reviewing the final draft of her contract with a steady hand and a reinvigorated spirit. Each of them, Victoria and Cole forging a new chapter, Kyle and Audra acknowledging the fine line between rivalry and respect, Clare and Victor reinforcing the bonds of family, stood on the cusp of transformation. In Genoa City, where power and passion collide, it was these moments of alliance and revelation that propelled their stories forward, weaving a tapestry of ambition, reconciliation, and the unbreakable ties that bind them all. Audra lingered by the polished mahogany bar, the chatter of patrons swirling around her like a hushed tide, as Holden caught her eye with an easy grin. She had just witnessed Kyle rise to the occasion, deflecting a pointed question from Holden with the grace and fortitude of a man who recognized when to take the high road, and she wasn't blind to the unspoken challenges he'd faced to do so. "I appreciate you choosing the path of honor tonight," Audra said, her tone genuinely warm yet laced with that familiar edge of playful skepticism. Before Holden could reply, a waiter appeared, setting before Kyle a steaming plate of pan-seared salmon and lemon risotto. Kyle nodded his thanks and rose to slip away, intent on savoring the meal after the socially charged tête-à-tête, leaving Audra momentarily alone with Holden. She watched his retreating back and threw her head back in mock exasperation. "What on earth are you playing at, Holden?" she demanded quietly. Holden poured her another glass of Chardonnay and settled into the stool beside her, unabashed. "I saw it, Audra, the spark between you and Kyle," he said, raising his eyebrows conspiratorially. Audra's lips curved in an incredulous half-smile. "Holden Novak, you absolute fool," she replied, though her eyes softened at his certainty. He leaned closer, voice dropping to a confidential murmur. "You know how you are when someone piques your interest, when a man steps into your orbit and shifts the balance of everything." He paused, letting the implication hang between them like a charged current. "You and Kyle had more than a professional spat," he added, nodding toward the door through which Kyle had just slipped. Audra's heart thumped at the reminder of their shared past. An explosive partnership at Jabot that had blossomed into something dangerously personal, before fracturing under ambition and betrayal. With a measured breath, she raised her glass, meeting Holden's gaze in the mirror behind the bar. She would neither confirm nor deny his accusation, but inside, she acknowledged that she had felt it too. Meanwhile, across town in the bright morning hush of Society Cafe, Victoria Newman sipped her espresso with a hint of triumph in her smile. Nick sat opposite her, his eyes soft with concern as he listened to her recount the delicate negotiations of the week, and the delicate state of Cole Howard's health. Before he could respond, the bell above the cafe door jingled, and Cole himself appeared, walking with that slight stoop and careful grace that betrayed his lingering frailty. Victoria's smile widened. "I have an idea that will surprise you," she began, leaning forward so that the sunlight danced in her auburn hair. Cole arched an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "I think you should move into the carriage house with me," she said, her voice steady though her heart fluttered at the thought of sharing more than boardroom banter. "We could live together as one big, happy family, just you, me, Johnny, and Katie." Cole paused, the memory of long nights alone in his sleek apartment flooding back as he recalled the isolation that had accompanied his convalescence. "I'm not just moving into the carriage house with you," he reminded her gently. "Your daughter and son have already spent time there. They thought I lived in that house." Victoria laughed softly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I ran into them this morning. Both of them asked after you and assumed you were already settled in the carriage house," she said. At that moment, Nick spotted Sharon as she entered the cafe and excused himself, giving the couple a private moment to savor the possibility of a new beginning. Alone now with Victoria's hopeful gaze, Cole felt a surge of resolve. "Then yes," he said, surprising them both with the steadiness in his voice. "I'll move in with you and Claire." He reached for her hand across the small wooden table, warmth passing between them. As he rose to stand, however, his knee buckled unexpectedly and he caught himself on the back of his chair. Victoria's tranquil smile snapped into alarm as she rose to his side. "Heavens, are you all right?" she asked, her brow creased with genuine worry. Cole managed a reassuring smile, though it faltered. "I'm fine," he said, masking the tremor in his voice. "I'm making progress, but I'm not entirely past this illness yet." In his eyes, Victoria saw both determination and a flicker of doubt. Had he truly recovered, or was the carriage house merely the next stop on a journey he was still too weakened to complete? As she guided him gently back to his seat, the promise of unity mingled with the uncertainty of his fragile health, leaving both of them to wonder whether the ties that bound them would hold fast when tested by hidden vulnerabilities. In the quiet pre-dawn stillness, Claire Newman made her way across the dew-dappled lawn of the Newman Ranch, her breath billowing in little clouds that dissipated as soon as they formed. Clutched under her arm was a chocolate-filled croissant, the very same kind her grandfather had once sneaked to her as a treat when she was too small to reach the kitchen counter. In her other hand she carried a simple paper bag, its corners crumpled from hours of carrying, which held a single, freshly baked horn of pastry, Victor's favorite. She had thought long and hard about how to begin the conversation she needed to have. Nothing formal, no announcements, no boardroom facades, just granddaughter to grandfather in the sunlit rose garden where he so often strolled, his posture rigid but thoughtful as he inspected each bud. She found him there, examining a perfect bloom as though its every petal carried a secret. "Good morning, grandfather," she said as she approached, setting the croissant beside him on the low stone plinth he used to rest his hands. Victor Newman turned, surprise and delight mingling in his dark eyes. "Claire," he responded after a heartbeat, voice both warm and laced with that indefinable edge of authority he always carried. "I take it you wanted to speak with me?" Claire nodded, smoothing the front of her tailored blazer as though preparing for a boardroom pitch, but her eyes were soft with sincerity. "Yes. It's about Kyle." At the mention of his name, Victor's expression tightened, a shadow flickering across his features. He straightened, hands folding behind his back once more. "Have you cancelled your plans to move in with him?" he asked, the question laced with concern, his own brand of blunt affection. Claire shook her head. "Not yet." She paused, searching his face for understanding. "But Kyle and I have decided to postpone that move." Relief washed over Victor's face so visibly that Claire almost felt guilty for the ease of her revelation. His next words came with genuine regret. "I'm very sorry to hear that." She stepped closer to him, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "Grandfather, it's for the best. With the Nikki Newman fundraiser coming up, and all the commitments I've already made, I need to focus my energy there. I want it to be perfect." Victor regarded her for a moment, the lines around his eyes softening. "Then we will make it perfect," he replied. "Tell me what you need." At that, Claire allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. She sketched out her plan. An elegant garden gala on the sprawling lawn behind the ranch house, tables draped in ivory linen and dotted with arrangements of white peonies and blush roses. An auction of rare paintings, with proceeds to benefit local children's charities that bore Nikki's name. A midnight performance by the Genoa City Philharmonic, to cap the evening with soaring strings. As she described each detail, Victor listened, nodding once in a while to signal his assent, pulling out a crisp notebook from his breast pocket and jotting down notes. When she was finished, he closed the book with a snap and said, "Consider me entirely at your disposal. I will see to it that the finest caterers, the best lighting, even the security you require are arranged. Your mother's legacy will be honored in style." With their alliance sealed, Claire returned to her car, the morning sun gilding the horizon and illuminating her face with hope. By midday, she was sitting on a wrought iron bench beneath the sweeping oak in the town park, unwrapping her own simple lunch. The bench was shaded by turning leaves and offered a view of the duck pond where families strolled and children fed breadcrumbs to the birds. She had arranged to meet Kyle Howard here. An informal catch-up to discuss their shared vision, now postponed, of a future together in the carriage house. As she sipped iced tea, her phone buzzed with a text message from Audra. "Charles, I appreciate the way you and Kyle have risen above your differences." Claire tucked the phone into her purse with a reflective smile, just as Kyle appeared, his stride confident but tempered by the subtle weariness she had come to recognize as the after-effects of his recent health scare. "Hey," he greeted, sliding onto the bench beside her. "How's it going?" His easy warmth made her heart skip, even though they had agreed to take things slow. She nodded toward her phone. "Audra thinks you're being very gracious," Claire said, watching the fleeting tug of emotion cross his face. "She says you've set aside old grudges." Kyle glanced at her, then out at the tranquil scene. "We both know it wasn't just a professional spat," he replied quietly. "There was more to it. Passion, pride, frustration." He turned back to Claire, vulnerability flickering in his dark eyes. "But I've moved past it." He paused, as though weighing his next words. "No reason for us to hold on to animosity, especially when there's so much we could build together." Claire reached out and touched his arm. "Thank you, Kyle." She smiled, the breeze ruffling her hair. "Your willingness to let go means more than you know." Across the grass, under the filtered sunlight, Audra stood beneath a maple tree, arms crossed over her designer coat. She watched Claire and Kyle with a careful, studied interest, her expression inscrutable. Pulling out her own phone, she dialed Victor's number. "Grandfather," she began, voice low and urgent, "Kyle is falling into my trap." The line went silent except for Victor's calm confirmation, "I see." By late afternoon, the cafe at Society hummed with activity. Sharon Collins was at the counter, adjusting a napkin and straightening a sugar packet, her casual uniform belying the concern in her eyes as she waited for Nick Newman to arrive. When he stepped through the door, she gave him a warm smile and motioned to a cozy corner table. "You don't have to worry," she said as he sank into the chair opposite her. "Phyllis and I are perfectly fine on our own today. We're safe, comfortable, you can relax." Nick exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders as he studied her face, grateful for her steady presence. Sharon leaned forward, voice gentle but probing. "But tell me, Nick, have you ever wondered what it would be like if you and Phyllis were a couple again?" His gaze flicked to the door where passers-by spilled in, then back to her. The question hung between them like a faded photograph from a life they once shared. Nick set his coffee down, running a hand through his hair. In that moment, he saw not just Sharon's friendly warmth but the depth of her understanding, how well she knew the tangled emotions that bound him to Phyllis. He drew a steadying breath. "Sharon," he answered quietly, "I've thought about it, sure. But right now, I'm exactly where I need to be, in the present." As dusk fell over Genoa City, each of them. Claire at the ranch forging new alliances with her grandfather, Kyle and Claire charting a tentative path forward while Audra set her own plans in motion, and Sharon and Nick navigating the fragile possibilities of their intertwined pasts, found themselves at a crossroads of hope, rivalry, loyalty, and love. The next chapters of their stories would be written in decisions made under the late-day sky, in conversations whispered among rose bushes and beneath ancient oaks, and in the silent promises that held their families and futures together. In Genoa City, where every encounter rippled outward into both personal and corporate worlds, the ties that bound them were never simple, and the drama they inspired was only just beginning.